Well, thanks again for joining us. And again, my name is Jennifer Souter. I'm the Director of Patents and Licensing for WiSys. Pleased to be here today just to moderate this session and help keep the discussion going. So before we get started, Becky, I know you did a brief introduction, but if you want to give another introduction yourself, maybe share a little bit more detail, and then Thomas will ask you and others to also do the same. So, but Becky, I'll turn it over to you for now.
Yeah, that's great. I'm seeing that somebody else is joining us, so that's good. Hopefully we get a few more people. Like I said in the big room, my name's Becky Duffy. I'm the MD Admissions Advisor for the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health in Madison, Wisconsin. I have been in my role since September of 2010. Previously, in 2000, I joined the university in the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences and did undergrad advising. So I said I got my undergrad degree at UW-Madison. The dean who hired me back into the university then talked me into going back to school. So I also have a master's degree in Ed Leadership and Policy Analysis from UW-Madison. I am more than happy to answer any questions you have about getting prepared to apply to our medical school. Each med school's got a little bit different focus and interest areas. So I'm really only comfortable talking about UW School of Medicine and Public Health, which is the public medical school here in the state of Wisconsin. Medical College of Wisconsin, which you heard at least one of the other folks is part of, is the private medical school in the state. And so we compete, but we're friendly, and they're a little bit different in what they're expecting than what we are expecting.
Oh, that's helpful. Thank you. And Thomas, Robert, welcome. Since we have a small group, I certainly would like each of you to introduce yourselves, maybe what school you're from, what year you're in, your major, and then, why you're here. And then certainly I think we can start off if you have any questions for Becky, but let's do introductions first. So Thomas, I'll start with you.
Hi, my name is Thomas Mesnick. I am attending the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, and I am an incoming freshman, actually. And my major is biochemistry and molecular biology. And I'm just here to learn more about the process, the admissions process, really what like a timeline looks like for a student like me. I would love to apply to the University of Wisconsin-Madison Medical School. So that's really great information that I hopefully can learn today.
Great, thank you. Robert? You're muted, Robert.
We can't hear you.
Oh, I forgot.
There we go.
I'm kind of a sophomore senior. I enrolled at UW Oshkosh with about 135 credits. Unfortunately, none of it counted towards my degree. So.
Robert, can you get a little bit closer to your mic? Because I'm getting about every other word.
Is that better?
Yeah, a little bit.
I transferred to UW Oshkosh with about 135 credits, but none of it counted. So I'm really like a sophomore senior kind of. I'm going for a rehabilitation science degree and wanting to do the UW-Madison doctorate in physical therapy afterwards.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to be terribly helpful with PT. Physical therapy is located in the School of Medicine and Public Health, and I do know my counterparts over in PT, but I really don't know all of their processes. So I can tell you a lot about medical school, but I'm not so helpful about physical therapy.
Well, maybe if we, start, Becky, with just some general kind of information about the admissions process and timeline, because I'm sure some of that, to some extent, applies, to a lot of different things on how students can prepare, things they should think about. So maybe just if you could talk a little bit about that application process and maybe things that students can get ready for. And I know, Thomas, you asked a little bit about the timeline. So as an incoming freshman, and obviously Robert's at a different stage in his career for the school, and maybe a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, at least for medical school, the timeline to apply is sort of like having a baby. Now I'm talking to two men and they're going to go, what does that mean? It takes forever is what that means. You'll feel pregnant a very long time, even though you're not having a baby. Our class that will be starting in the fall, which is in a couple of weeks, our students come in on August 16th. They actually hit the submit button, many of them, May of 2020. So it takes a really, really long time. for the whole application process. So it doesn't matter what year you're going to apply. AMCAS, we use a central application service. I believe physical therapy also uses a central application service. Ours is called AMCAS, and AMCAS will open for applicants in May every year for those who want to matriculate more or less the following fall. So you'll have the opportunity to create an AMCAS account, start putting everything together. AMCAS verifies all of your transcripts, all of your grades, all of that. And then they send it off to the medical schools that you're interested in applying to. So submission date for the very earliest that you can submit to AMCAS would be July 1st. They verify everything. That usually takes them about 6 to 8 weeks. And then the medical schools start to get things in July. Now, we all have different deadlines, so you'll want to read those carefully, because most of us do rolling admissions. Unlike when you applied to your undergrad institution, you had a pretty good idea if you had your application in by this time, the school would get back to you on a certain date, usually, you know, in the spring or whatever. But once we start interview process, we will start making decisions. Yes, we would like you to come in for an interview. No, thank you for an interview. You come in and interview. Yes, we like you, so we're making you an offer. We kind of like you, so you get on our alternate list, or we're sorry, we don't have room for you this year. That will start going on for our medical school. We start interviews in September, and then we will interview only till the end of February or the first part of March. Sort of depends on how the winter holidays and final exams fall, because our current medical students help us with interviews. So if they're not available, we can't interview. And we finalize making all of our decisions by the end of March. And then the process starts all over again. So it takes quite a bit of time to actually find out sometimes if you're going to medical school. So what are we looking for on that application? Certainly grades are important. Do the best that you can do in all of your studies. Our school, or our medical schools, use a test called the MCAT, the Medical College Admissions Test. So you'll need an MCAT score. And then you'll need things that show us you know what you're getting yourself into. Volunteering in a healthcare setting, working in a healthcare setting, community service back to others, athletics, hobbies. There's all sorts of things that we look for. If you can think about what you are looking for in your own physician, we look for those things, because truly, when was the last time you asked your doctor or your physical therapist to draw an amino acid on the whiteboard in their exam room? Probably never, right? So you have to be smart enough to make it through medical school, do well on the exams, but then there's all those other qualities that we're looking for, right? Do you have empathy? Do you have compassion? Do you have the ability to improve? The AAMC, the Association of American Medical Colleges, I love that we use acronyms. If I use an acronym you don't know, pipe up and tell me, because I try real hard to at least tell you what those are, but I slip up. We all have these foreign languages that no one else understands. So if you go to the AAMC's website, you can just Google it. They actually have 15 competencies for pre-med students. So I would put in pre-med competencies, AAMC, and you'll probably get them. The ones that I think stand out, obviously, are compassion and empathy. We want that in our students. The other thing, I call it coachability. They call it something fancy. But if you were ever involved in athletics at all, if the coach told you to fix something, you didn't necessarily take that personal, I hope. You know, if they said, well, you need to like change this in your gait, or in your throw, if you're a person that throws balls or whatever, and you took that information and that advice and you were able to correct it and improve. Medical students get corrected a lot. And so do you have the capacity to take feedback and then improve? So they call it something fancy, but coachability, those are things that we're all looking for. And so, Thomas, you have time now because you're a freshman to do a lot of different things. Certainly you want to do well in your studies. You want to get involved in community activities on your campus. Same with you, Robert, if you're on campus activities where you can get some leadership opportunities, give back to your community, and then hopefully get either a job or a volunteer position in a clinical setting. Those things are slowly coming back, or they were until about a week and a half ago, right? Right now, most often, the easiest way, I guess I can say the easiest way getting clinical experience is getting a job in that setting. Now that's going to require probably a little more education. If you want to do a CNA, you have to go to tech school and get the CNA. EMT, same kind of thing. Scribing is a new little cottage industry, thanks to electronic medical records. And that would get you into a clinic or a hospital where you're actually filling out the MyChart or the electronic medical records while the physician is doing their exam. Getting as much exposure as possible so that you can tell the committee, you know what you're getting yourself into. Now, Robert, I do know because I talked to my colleagues over in PA and PT, with the PA program, they used to have a number of shadowing hours that was required. I believe the PT program also did. Due to the pandemic, they've kind of realized that's not really realistic right now. But I would definitely send them a note to find out what their expectations are about having an opportunity to shadow a physical therapist and learn that way. That was the traditional way that we kind of thought maybe med students knew what they were getting into, shadowing a physician. We also know there's other ways you can demonstrate knowing what you're getting yourself into.
Speaking a little bit about like the hospital care, some of the questions we've had is, how many hours of direct hospital care, should students try to have when they're applying? And likewise, you talked about shadowing and COVID, like what are some of the alternatives for that? But are there any kind of limits or minimums you're looking for?
That's a really good question, Jennifer. We're working really hard with our committee. We do what we call a holistic review, which is certainly grades and MCAT score part of it, but then that's that other part. I don't know if there's a good number to have. I like to say the number of opportunities or hours is enough for you to be able to talk about why you want to be, in my case, a physician. How do you know you want to do this? And can you demonstrate you know what you're getting yourself into? So for some people who can write really reflectively, who can articulate what that experience meant to them, maybe 40 hours is enough. I mean, I've seen people who have several hundred hours of shadowing, yet they really can't explain how that impacted them and how they know they want to do this for the rest of their lives from the experiences that they have. So Thomas, and this goes for you too, Robert, you guys are all paying seg fees, or you will be, Thomas. And so take advantage of your writing center at your campus, because that's what they do. They help people put together personal statements. They help you organize and put your thoughts together. And when I advise students sometimes to see their writing center, they think I mean that they can't write. And that's not it at all. I'm not saying you can't write. The people in your writing centers in general want to be professors of English, journalists, so forth, people who write as a living and they know what they're getting themselves into. And I can tell you my own little war story. Remember, I said that the dean that hired me into the College of Ag and Life Sciences talked me into going back to school. I had been out of undergrad for 14 years and I had to write a personal statement about why they would let me into the grad school. 14 years, graduated in the mid 80s when I wasn't thinking grad school at all, when nobody I knew was going to go to grad school. So I graduated, I got my degree, but I'm like, oh yeah, I'm competing against undergrads now with like grade point averages when I was an undergrad I didn't know existed. They're never going to let me in. So I had to write and take 14 years of professional experience and get them into like the square, like we're looking at right now in Zoom, is about how I felt I was writing. The writing center fellow that I met with was really great and helped me figure out what I should keep in and what I should maybe get out, throw out. And it was really helpful because if I showed that to my husband, bless his heart, you know, he wasn't ever going to say anything bad about my personal statement. My mom, my sister, you know, friends, they're all going to tell me it's great. But maybe it wasn't. The writing center, he didn't care, right? We had a professional working relationship. He could tell me something without fear that he was going to hurt my feelings. So when it is time to start writing those personal statements and putting your ideas pen to paper, take advantage of the writing center. You're paying for it. They are not going to think you're a bad writer. They're just somebody that can help you put your thoughts in the right direction. So somebody who has no idea what you're writing about can understand.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. And kind of going back to, you know, the application process and things you need for it, you know, thinking about your writing and what you're doing. What can you say about letters of recommendation? Are those useful? Like what's the best sources? How much variety is needed? Can you talk a little bit about that and how students can start to think about that?
Oh, that's a really good question, Jennifer. Yeah, our school requires 4 letters of recommendation for the MD program, 3 academic and 1 non-academic. So, you know, Thomas, this is a good time for you to start kind of getting to know your professors. Robert, I don't know what their program requires for letters, but I'm sure they require letters. In general, when you are starting to make relationships, you want, at least for our school, we want you to get us letters from people who know you the best. Some medical schools want a biology professor, a chemistry professor, and a physics professor. The UW SMPH, we just want people who know you the best. So if you have a really great relationship with a Spanish professor, great, that's an academic letter. If you have a really great relationship with an English professor, that's great. If you find in your studies you're taking classes from the same professor several times over because they're in your department, that you just really like their style, they might be a really good person to form a relationship with to get a letter. Number one, they need to know you. So go to office hours. They do need to know you. And the best way to get to know them is to go to office hours or, you know, hang out a few minutes after class. If you're not stacked right up where you have to leave immediately to get across campus to get to your next class, you know, spend a little time afterwards. And I can tell you, faculty members like to talk about themselves. So even if you don't have a great question to show up at office hours with, that you're confused about something in your class, you don't have to go to office hours to talk about that you're confused. You can stop in and say, hey, you know, I'm really interested in the research you're doing. I understand you're working on this. Can you tell me more about that? They love to talk about themselves. So come up with a reason to go visit them. That way you can start making a relationship so that when it's time to get that letter, they can say, hey, I know Robert, he's, you know, really interested about this. He was great. He came to office hours, and they can, and you can give them some personal things that they can include into the letter. Because honestly, academic letter writers, if they don't get to know you, all start to sound the same. They'll say, oh yeah, they were one of the best biochemistry students I ever taught. And we can get that off of your transcript. If you were a good student, your transcript's going to reflect that. We want to know a little bit more about who you are as a person. So that's one way to get good letters. And then Thomas, because you're brand new at this, you have lots of time. You won't be writing anything for 3 years or maybe 4 years. So I would get, I don't know if you journal like longhand. My son would probably put it on his phone or his laptop. Have some place, and this can probably go to you, Robert, too, because I'm sure they're going to ask you to write essays. Write things down from your volunteer activities, from any clinical experiences you get. keep a journal about those, because I can hardly remember some days what I had for breakfast. I am certainly not going to remember today. But if something really cool happened today and I had a journal to put that down, when I'm getting ready to come up with things to talk about in my essays, I can go back and it'll tell me, oh yeah, I remember how I felt when I helped the elderly neighbor get her groceries in, or I, had an opportunity to shadow this physician, or, I participated in National Night Out. That's all going on around here. So, maybe you helped the EMS in your community at National Night Out. And some of those things would be a lot more crisper. So those are important parts. So put a journal together, whether it's in good old spiral notebook or on your laptop someplace.
Well, that's a really good tip, because you're right. You kind of find it hard to talk about yourself and your experiences, but if you've kept a journal of it, it's probably easier to reference back. So I have some more questions, but I'll stop there and see if Thomas or Robert, do you have any questions for Becky while we're taking a pause?
My biggest question is, I'm a little different than most students. I'm retired Army. I'm 42 years old. I'm ready to start a second career, but I don't have a lot of the high school type things that are relevant for my application. So I'm really looking for ways to set my application apart from others, because we're all going to have pretty much the same classes. We're all going to pretty much have the similar grades. And I know it's what can you do to set yourself apart that really makes a difference. How much would my
I have a fly, I'm sorry.
community involvement, because I'm really active in the community. I mean, like I said, I'm retired Army, a disabled veteran. How much is that going to help me set myself apart?
I can talk about medical school. So for our committee, our service members are highly regarded. The service that you gave to our country is highly regarded. The leadership that you developed in the Army or any branch, that matter of fact, will be, for our committee, really important part. So our committee would want to know about your service and anything that you did that may or may not be relative. Sometimes we have service members who were, part of medical corps or medical corpsmen and so forth. So that seems to be a little bit more relative to what they want to get into now. But even if you weren't, your leadership opportunities, any awards you earned, those things will be important to them. Well, you are still at La Crosse, right? That's where you said you were, Robert, or am I getting schools mixed up?
I'm at Oshkosh.
You're at Oshkosh. Okay, well, you're at Oshkosh. Try to get involved in any student orgs that work with you within your time frame. I know as a returning adult, sometimes that can be a challenge, but if there's a veterans group that at Oshkosh that you can join, where you can mentor some of the younger vets. And then also, I know this goes for any health profession. They want to know why you're getting involved in this. So work on trying to become a volunteer in a clinical setting, whether that's a nursing home, a hospice, a clinic, or a hospital. See what they will allow you to do. It was slowly starting to come back. Like I said, until the last couple of weeks, our volunteer services in the Madison area were starting to open back up. Nursing homes were starting to allow people to come in and be friendly visitors. Keep an eye on that. There might be some virtual stuff that is still available. I don't know all of the services available at each university. At the University of Wisconsin at Madison, we happen to have on campus a volunteer repository, more or less, called the Morgridge Center. I'm not sure if every campus has a opportunity for you to find a clearinghouse for volunteer opportunities, but I would reach out, talk to your advisor on campus to see if they have something similar, because many community organizations are looking for college students, whether they're a little bit of an older returning adult or somebody brand new like Thomas, just to get your foot in the door. If you're a little bit of an older applicant, if you happen to have a family, our committee takes that into account as well. So if you volunteer at your kid's school, you're a youth sports coach, you're a scout leader. Those are things that our committee also takes into consideration. And we do have a fair number of returning adults who even want to become doctors. Middle of the road age for our incoming class in the last 5 or 6 years is 25. We have 30-year-olds quite often in our incoming class.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Becky. And thanks, Robert, for the question. Thomas, a question from you?
I was just looking at just baseline numbers for you guys. I know like general stuff for those bigger schools like Madison are more like 3.8 and 5.10-ish. Is that what you guys are really looking for your baseline for those two things? I know that the other important things are there too, but I'm just wondering about those.
Yeah, I mean, between now and the time that you have to apply, I can only speak about like today, but middle of the road for our incoming class for the MCAT for the last several years has bounced around about 5.12, 5.13. That's the middle of the road. Middle of the road GPA is bounced around about a 3.6. So a class is 176 people. That means half of the class is not at those points. Half of the class is over those points. Thomas, are you a Wisconsin resident?
I am a Minnesota resident.
Okay. Well, we are the only state-supported medical school in Wisconsin. That means our 72% of our class of those 176 needs to be from residents of the state of Wisconsin. So we want you to apply, but we have about 30 to 35 seats for out-of-state candidates. So right now, one of your best bets is to also go out and take a look at what the University of Minnesota is looking for. Because as a state school, Minnesota is going to act a lot like Wisconsin, okay? Because of reciprocity, a lot of Wisconsin kids go to Minnesota. A lot of Minnesota kids come to Wisconsin system schools. So we're pretty used to seeing those things. We know we'll get a lot of Minnesota grads in that are Wisconsin residents. I'm pretty sure Minnesota sees a lot of UW system grads going to their school. So yeah, do as well as you can in your undergrad, but you don't have to be a 4.0 student. We reject 4.0, 524, 525 MCATs, which sounds like, wow, they're really smart. Why don't you want them? Because they don't have those other things. They don't have the leadership skills. We can't tell if they've taken care of a goldfish. They don't have empathy. They don't have compassion. They don't have the other things because they've spent all their time in their books. So we want those other things. We want you to be able to demonstrate those other skills. So yes, grades are important. Go out and do well, do the best that you can. We also know life sometimes happens on the way to the finish line. But you have a good start. You're going to start classes. You have a clean slate, so you don't have to try to rehab any kind of grades. Go out and do the best that you can. Seek out all the support that you can that UW Eau Claire is going to provide you as far as opportunities for tutoring, or even just, I hate the season because flies get in and then I'm the only one in the house. Why are you here? Flying around my head. Use any kind of things that Eau Claire is going to be able to provide you just to get an extra leg up. I can tell you that at UW-Madison anyway, the students that are showing up at our tutoring aren't necessarily people who are really, really struggling. They're the people that want to just take that B+ to the A- or the B to B+, just to get that little edge. So, don't be afraid to use those services. It doesn't show that you're afraid that you're failing or anything. It's just helping you figure out what the next best step is, because going from high school to undergrad, and I don't care where you went to high school, it's a big difference. You have to figure out where to do your laundry and where you can get your next meal, and never mind where the classrooms are, especially now that there haven't been a lot of in-person tours of campus. So, just take advantage. And if you use those services more than you needed to the first semester, then you can back off using them the next semester. Once you figure out study skills and what works best for you.
That's really helpful. I mean, I think just reiterating the different support services the campus offer. You mentioned earlier the writing and, now kind of tutoring. And it, like I say, it doesn't mean you're a bad writer or a bad student. It's just like take advantage of what you're paying for. Ciara, I see that you've joined us recently. I just wanted to welcome you. And if you had any questions for Becky, please turn your video and audio on. We'd be happy to hear from you. Otherwise, I'll continue on, but please feel free to join us.
Yeah, and I think we're a small enough group, Jennifer. If somebody wants to chime in, just give us a
wave. Yeah. Well, I think, thinking about kind of, again, talking about, Minnesota versus Wisconsin, what should students be thinking about when they're thinking about deciding on what school to apply? Are there factors around the size of the school, the location, the ranking, the cost, whether it has specialties that they're looking at? Is there any advice you can offer around that, about what you should really be thinking about, of not just I want to go here, but kind of broaden your horizons and think bigger?
Sure. Well, Jennifer, national average for medical school applications may surprise you. They apply to like anywhere from 11 to 15 medical schools. And so now, Thomas, in your summer jobs, start squirreling away money, because it's not inexpensive to apply to all these medical schools. MCAT has a fee to send that application off to the schools. And then we have something we call secondary applications, which truly is the application then to that medical school. I try to estimate that it's probably going to cost you at least $100 a school that you're going to apply to. So we'll just pretend it'll probably go up by the time you have to apply for inflation, but let's pretend it's about $100 a school. Most Midwestern students tend to apply to Midwestern schools, and that's perfectly fine, perfectly acceptable. California schools are going to be really hard to get into, just because they do not have enough medical schools for their own state population, and they tend to export a lot of students out to the rest of the world. Texas schools are going to be kind of hard to apply to. They're very state specific. And the fact they have their own application service called TCAS or something for Texas medical schools. But, take a look around and see if there are schools that match what you want for their mission. We're a big public school. Minnesota is very similar in that we need to educate doctors to do all sorts of things, from being a family practice doc in a small rural community to maybe becoming an MD, PhD, to do great research. And by the way, that's going to take 8 years of your life, 4 years in medical school and 4 years in grad school. Or, just to be a general surgeon, or maybe an orthopedic surgeon, or an ophthalmologist, or you name it. So we have students that have a broad base. There are some medical schools that are still very research focused. And in fact, you need a thesis to graduate with your MD. So, there's it used to be a book. You can tell how old I am, but it's a website now called MSAR, Medical School Admissions Requirements. That can give you a glance picture of everybody's requirements. So you're not like having to go to everybody's website. And that can kind of give you an idea of how big the school is, what the cost of attendance is, their pre-med course requirements, gender breakdown, and so forth. In general, your home state school is probably going to be your most economical, because the taxpayers pay some of that. But find what meshes with you. Our school is going to be very interested in people who have an interest in serving underserved populations, whether that's rural or urban, closing the healthcare disparity gap that really came. Now, most people now are very well aware of it after the pandemic. Most people in Wisconsin or through the Midwest, if it didn't impact them, they really didn't realize the big gap. Having an interest in public health, because it's in our name. Those are things that are going to be really important to our committee. And so they would like to see that kind of stuff reflected in an applicant. But each school is going to be a little bit different on what they're picky about. So use that MSAR kind of talk to as many people as you can. Talk to your own physician, find out where they went to school. Again, professors like to talk about themselves, doctors like to talk about themselves too.
One question that I meant to ask earlier when we were talking about MCAT, and Thomas, you were kind of talking a little bit about this, but if students take it more than once, do schools take an average of the scores, or do they often just look at the highest score?
That's a great question. And I think each school kind of looks at it a little differently. The MCAT people would like committees to average it. They would like that to be an average because they believe that's most representative on how you would do if you took it once. I'll tell you what our committee is like herding cats. We ask them to do that, but our committee is 30 people. Okay. So that's a benefit by having a big committee because you don't have to impress one person, or there's not one person that's going to keep you from moving on. So I do know faculty members who give you the benefit of the doubt and will take the best score. I also know faculty members who will sort of mix and match because there's subsections on the MCAT and they'll try to give you the best score. And I do know faculty members who then will average it. What I will say about the MCAT, do not take it early. Take it when you are ready to take it, when you're the most prepared, and do not take it as a practice exam. ACTs and SATs, you can take that multiple times and send the school the best score. Your MCAT will stay with your application forever. So take it when you're ready to take it, and definitely do not take it before you've had the first semester of the subjects that are on the exam. So make sure you don't take it before you have first semester of OChem, first semester of biochem, first semester of physics. Those are things that will be on the exam. And in my opinion, I know people try to self-study and maybe try to take the MCAT before they take the biochem, but it's really in your best interest to have at least one semester of that done, because self-studying for some people works, but not for a ton of folks.
No, thank you. So I want to turn it back over to the students and see if there's any questions. Sierra, I see you're still here. Feel free to, again, chime in if you have any questions for Becky. Robert, Thomas, any other questions from your end as well?
Not so much questions, but pretty much for me, Madison and Milwaukee are my only options because I plan to use the Wisconsin GI Bill to pay for it. And so really, I'm just looking to maximize my application to those two schools because it's either that or I don't go.
Right. Yeah, certainly the Wisconsin GI Bill is a really big plus, and we have medical students who use that as well, that, they're kind of hoping that we will take them because the Wisconsin GI Bill is a really, really nice addition to the federal GI Bill that will allow you to go to a public school. Milwaukee also has an excellent program. I would reach out to both the UW-Madison program and the Milwaukee program to find out exactly what they're looking for and how best to position yourself. Because those of us in the admissions office, we want to help you be successful, at least the people that I know in admissions offices. We don't want you, even though I have absolutely no say in who gets in, and my colleagues in some of the other areas might have a little bit of a say, but most of us don't get a vote with the committee, but we want you to be successful. And I would reach out to Milwaukee and I would reach out to my colleagues at UW-Madison. They'll help you figure out how to best position your application so that you stand the best chance with their committees. Both programs are well respected in the state. Both programs, do send people out in a very good way. So certainly reach out to them and see what you can do to position yourself. They will help you. Send them an email, and they will get back with you. I can almost bet.
Thank you. Thomas, any last questions on your side?
I have a question on how much what's the difference between how much an athletic would factor into an application versus a regular activity? Or yeah. the difference between.
Okay, are you going to do a sport for Eau Claire?
Yes, I'll be running track.
Okay, well, I think our committee appreciates athletes mainly because, as one former admissions member that I know really well, who's a carbon cancer doc, says, athletes tend not to flunk out. Why? Because you guys have figured out time management and you figured out how to take critique and fix it. So I think that our committee tends to give athletes a little bit of a bump when they're looking at their application, especially if they're able to keep their grades up where they need to be, and especially if they've been able to continue to do volunteer activities and so forth. So, make sure you get your studies done. As part of your, because I know people who are in track and field, are you also doing cross country? Some of them do both, but some don't.
I will not be running cross country, but I will be doing indoor and outdoor. So I'll start in November-ish. Okay.
So yeah, around your shoulder seasons, if you can do any kind of volunteering, if UW Eau Claire Athletics don't have some sort of a built-in volunteer thing, you can start that. I know at UW-Madison, they have a program with their athletes that do regular volunteering. Now, my son was a student athlete at UWM, and UWM didn't seem to have the same kind of thing that was set up at UW-Madison. But we have athletes that often would round through the hospital and stop in and see kids. And, so if that's not something that your track and field group is doing, that might be something that you could organize and touch base with the hospital system in Eau Claire, which I know there's both St. Clair's and Mayo, both have hospitals up there. So, getting an opportunity to volunteer and do some leadership is great. Always talk about what you've learned about yourself from being an athlete, more so than the accomplishments. There are a fair number of former athletes on the committee, but people who don't either have children that were athletes or were an athlete themselves kind of sometimes don't understand all of the nuances that go into being a college athlete. So instead of talking about any kind of accomplishments that you had, talk about how the work got you to where you're going to be and how that's going to translate into being a physician, dedication, showing up for each other. If in the unfortunate event that somehow you do end up with an injury, how you work with your trainers, all of those things. So think about it in how that will prepare you best for medical school. Even if it was even if you were somebody who had to work through school, right? And you ended up having to wait tables to pay tuition. Talk about waiting tables and how that would help you be a good physician, and the fact that you have to learn to solve problems. You have to work with another team of people. Always kind of keep that in your mind. So those are things I would highly recommend. Just kind of always thinking about is how is this transferable to becoming a doc?
Yeah, it sounds like you're kind of, what experiences have you had and how do you leverage those to really tell your story? And I think that goes across the board, Thomas, for you in athletics, and Robert, for you in terms of your military career as well. So so I think we're getting close to the end of our time. One more question I had for you, Becky, just to close us out is, if you had one key piece of advice that you could give to our students, that you wish maybe someone had told you or had told students applying for your programs, what would it be?
I would think undergrad career goes faster than you think it will. And so take advantage of opportunities that your institution's providing you, because this may be the only time you will be able to, sorry about my clock, another joy of working at home, but this may be the only time that if you ever want to take a philosophy class and you've got that elective in the program that you're studying in, take the philosophy class, okay? Because you might not ever get a chance to go back and do that. Take the opportunity to take a leap of faith in something and do something that kind of challenges you and you didn't think you could do. Undergrad is a time to be able to do some of those things because you're hopefully going to work for a very, very long time, and you might not ever be able to come back and circle around to do some of those things again. So, you know, take advantage of what your institution has to offer. And our UW system schools are all wonderful. And everybody keeps saying that it's Madison's medical school. I have not once said it's UW-Madison School of Medicine and Public Health, have I? It is the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health. We are the UW, just like Oshkosh and Eau Claire and Parkside and Stevens Point and Superior, although we don't really get people from Superior. They aren't very interested in medicine. We want folks from all of our system schools, and we are the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and Public Health, not the University of Wisconsin Madison School of Medicine and Public Health.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And, you know, Becky, just really want to thank you for your time. I know we've got a little bit of minute here left. They're going to move us back into the main room, but really appreciate the discussion. Thanks, Thomas and Robert, for your questions, and Sierra for joining us. I guess, are there other places you'd recommend folks to go for advice? You mentioned the admissions. Anyone else that you think, just in the last few seconds we've got?
Well, number one, are they going to get my contact information? Do they get that?
We can certainly share that, or if you want to pop it in the chat button really quickly.
Okay, I'm going to RL Duffy, take a pen, RL Duffy at WISC.edu. Feel free to email me.
I'm just going to put that in the chat right now.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm RL Duffy at WISC.edu. Medical school related questions, please feel free to email me at any time. Remind me how I met you, because sometimes I forget, because I do a lot of these things. And I'm willing to, you know, answer any questions that we didn't get to, or you think of afterwards, because that happens. We'll hang up and then you'll say,
yeah, no, thanks very much for offering that. And I did just put it in the chat and mention medical related questions. So again, thanks, Thomas and Robert is here for your time. And thank you, Becky for being here with us today. So we'll probably be zipped away at some point. So it usually comes very suddenly.
Yes, we'll be in another realm. So, but it was nice to meet all of you. And nice like I said, feel free to contact me.
All right, great. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye.